Hello and welcome to the AV Forums podcast, the home AV edition for Monday, the 19th of February 2024. And on this edition, I'm joined by Martin Dew, Julian Scott, and our special guest tonight, Gregg Loewen. Good evening, guys.
Hi, Phil.
Evening.
Right, we're doing things a little bit differently this year. If you didn't tune into the Hi-Fi podcast or the Movies podcast earlier this month, then let me explain things to you. So we are no longer live streaming. These podcasts are pre-recorded. And we've broken out the podcast into various categories. So we now have a podcast for hi-fi, TV, home AV, and we also have two movies editions. Plus, when it's a longer month, and we have a fifth Monday, so that's April, July, September, and December, there'll also be a gaming podcast this year. So every Monday of the month, of the year, in fact, you will have an AV Forums podcast, even in December, because we are pre-recording these. So we've got plenty to get through this year. And obviously the reason why we're breaking these out into separate categories is so we can deep dive into the subjects, answer your questions. So if you do have questions, then there are a few ways of getting in touch with us. Get your questions in. We'll then do them on the next podcast. So come and join us for all the podcasts this year. We should have something for everybody. Now, if you do watch podcasts on YouTube, just be aware this is no longer on the main YouTube channel. This now moves over to the AV Forums podcast movies channel. So if you search that out on YouTube and subscribe, then you won't miss any of the podcasts this year as they are published, like I say, every Monday. And of course, if you listen to the audio-only version, it will still be available through your podcast provider. It'll just be a new one every Monday for you. So that's how the podcast works. But you might be new to the AV Forums podcast. You might not know who we are and why we're around and why you should actually care. Well, we're one of the largest AV and hi-fi communities on the planet, on the internet. AV Forums has been around since 2000 is when the website launched. The editorial side of things, so that's the side of things that we do here, that started in 2003. We've got over 500,000 members of the website, lots more returning members and visitors. And of course, we cover editorial, which covers TV, hi-fi, home AV, gaming, movies, and physical media. And we create the content for you at the end of the day. We're not sponsored. We're not a manufacturer. We don't work for a manufacturer. We don't have any influence from them or from advertisers. We're here to give you honest, unbiased, and experienced opinions and knowledge. And a lot of us have been around this industry for a little time now. So just to introduce you to myself, if you're not aware, I'm Phil Hinton. I'm the editor of the site. I have been for the last 20 years. I helped build the editorial right from the start with the forum founder, Stuart. I'm an enthusiast first and foremost, even though I do this as my profession nowadays. I'm also a very experienced TV and AV reviewer and a display calibrator, and I'm trained and certified by ISF, THX, and PVA, and we're going to talk about PVA tonight because Gregg is along and he'll tell you all about himself in a minute. So I also produce the videos and reviews and so on. So you'll see my face on most of the videos on AV Forum. So that's who I am. Jules, why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I trained with under Gregg in 2011 under THX as it was then. As a video calibrator, and I've been doing it ever since. Now also PVA certified and assisting Gregg with the instruction at the present with the PVA courses now. So I've been professionally calibrating for all that period of time and cover grading studios, people's normal TVs, consumer TVs in their homes, and for high-end custom installations as well. So I get to see quite a lot of systems. I do a bit of audio calibration too.
Excellent. And also here tonight is Martin. Martin, introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are.
Yeah, hi. I moved to San Francisco in the 1990s and worked for Lucasfilm THX for nearly 10 years in marketing, sales, and business development on both the home and pro sides, but at different times. I then moved to LA and did business development for the NEC Corporation Digital Cinema Division, and we were one of the three at the time DCI compliant manufacturers for digital projectors for the theatrical rollout of digital projectors, replacing 35mm projectors. I then, before I moved back to the UK, I was in the States for 23 years. Before I moved back to the UK, I dabbled a bit, not only working as an actor, but also in film crews. In some cases with DreamWorks and Steven Spielberg's team. So those were fun years. And now I consult to a manufacturer, and I also review audio equipment for AV Forums and another well-known magazine.
Okay. So that's Martin. As you can see, bags of experience already. And finally, Gregg. Gregg's a special guest tonight. Gregg, tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been in the industry and so on.
Well, I've been in the industry now for about 23 years as a professional video calibrator and a video consultant. I created the video training program with THX, and I ran that for 11 years. And then I started off on my own with the Professional Video Alliance about 6 years ago now. So right now I'm the founder and the head of the Professional Video Alliance.
And what does the PVA do, just for those of the people out there maybe don't understand it?
Yeah, well, it's all video, and then just as the term says, it's an alliance. So the alliance brings together various manufacturers of video products and other people that care about video fidelity. So it doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether it's performance home theater or post-production or production in studio. Everyone has the same desire for image fidelity. I bring all the groups together so we all espouse those standards and we all strive to increase the awareness of those standards.
Excellent. So that's who we are. And of course, it's our goal to bring you the best factual information, reviews, videos, all that kind of thing. With the experience and knowledge that we have, hopefully you'll get some entertainment out of this, but also learn something along the way. Or maybe you've got questions, maybe you've got feedback, maybe you want to pick up on some of the things that we discussed this evening. And of course, you can do that by going to podcast@avforums.com on the email, go to AV Forums, got the forum list all the way down the bottom, and find this podcast and ask your question there. And of course, the other way is in the comments below. But before we get on with the show, we've got some competitions to get through and some really good prizes for people to win. So why don't we go through the competitions now, Martin?
Yep, sure. And excuse me, please, while I glance at my other monitor. But firstly, we've got a chance to win a Teak AI 303 integrated amplifier worth £799. This competition closes at 11:59 p.m. on Saturday, the 30th of February, 2024. Secondly, you can win the ultimate streaming system worth £2,400 from Roxanne and Monitor Audio with the Atessa streaming app and the MA Silver 107G bookshelf speakers. This competition closes at 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, the 28th of February of this year, 2024. And finally, you can win a Valencia Tuscany XL Ultimate Luxury Onyx Cinema Seat worth £2,200. That competition closes at 11:59 p.m. on Wednesday, the 28th of February.
Okay, that's the competitions. No previous winners to tell you about, but we do have some new patrons. Thank you very much for your support. Again, Martin, why don't you run through quickly who the new patrons are?
Yep, sure. Our new patrons are Jordan Holland, Dave Dean, David, Ben Ackerman, Saab Unleashed, Nick, and Arjan Verdi.
Okay. Again, thank you very much for your support. It really is appreciated. It does help us expand the editorial and these podcasts. And of course, you don't just have to be a patron. You can also buy us a coffee, and somebody did buy us a coffee, Martin.
Yes, Jimenez bought us a coffee. A coffee.
Excellent. Well, we'll share it amongst the four of us. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for your support. Right, so some Q&A feedback from previous podcasts from YouTube, actually. PW8796 asks, most energy efficient AV setup with minimal compromise. I'm stuck on this one because I don't think there's any way, really, if you want the best performance, and I just thinking from a display point of view, you're looking at a G rating anyway for most HDR TVs. So, and in terms of running amplifiers, I guess, Class D is maybe a little bit more efficient, but I'm really struggling with that one. Any suggestions, guys?
It's usually the first thing that has to come off, Phil, on a display is the energy saving.
Yeah.
But it's throttle everything back. It's it's restricting the quality, the performance of the display. So
Yeah.
it's hard to think of something.
And amplification as well. You need the amplification to drive and so on. So you're going to be using energy. I guess the only positive, or maybe a good positive spin that I could put on this is that we're no longer in the days of CRT or plasma, which were very, very power hungry. And in terms of amplification, I think we're getting to the point now where Class D is pretty efficient and pretty good, to be honest.
Yes, getting very, very good. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it. If it's an AV setup, it's gonna use power one way or another. Don't use the energy saving stuff on your display because you're just ruining the picture quality. It's probably the answer that we'd have to give at this moment in time. But if anybody's got any suggestions for PW8796, then of course, send them in to us and we'll have a look. Now, the Home AV podcast, we cover everything to do with AV, so projectors, big screens, home cinema systems, multi-channel systems, speakers, subwoofers, all that kind of jazz. And of course, we've just had one of the biggest shows, and I'm not talking about CES here, one of the biggest shows for the integration market, which is a big driver for innovation. It's the market where a lot of the technology that eventually trickles down to your living room is introduced, is used in not just residential systems, but big commercial systems. If you've ever wondered how these museums come up with their, projection on buildings and all that kind of thing, right down to creating a cinema in the home, there's a whole industry out there. And ISE certainly covers the vast majority of that industry. So we're not just talking about home cinema, you're talking about all sorts of display tech, all sorts of audio tech, multi-room, all that kind of thing. It's something I've never been to. And I really should have went to it when it was Amsterdam, because it would have been a nice, easy flight for me to get into Amsterdam and back home again. Barcelona is a little bit further, and I think it's an easy jet flight as well, which is never great. So anyway, I've never been to ISE, but the guys have, all three of our guests. So the reason that Jules and Gregg are in the same room is they've been holding the PVA training, which you always do that after these major shows. Gregg, what's the reason for that? Why is it you run your training after those?
Well, it's a lot of the same people that would attend a show want to come to the training. So that it's, one-stop shopping. They get the trade show and then they stay for the training. So it works out well.
Yeah. And you do that at most of these big events, don't you?
CES, ISE, and then NAB and IBC. Yes. So the four big trade shows for electronics, CEDIA, home, and then also the post-production shows, like the
Yeah.
NAB in Las Vegas and the IBC, which is in Amsterdam.
Yeah. So lots of these big trade shows, there's a whole industry out there that maybe you know about, maybe you don't know about. But the three guys have been at ISE. So, Martin, why don't you tell us what ISE is, what it stands for, and why it exists?
Well, ISE stands for Integrated Systems Europe, and it's a business to business or B2B show, essentially. It's where there is any massive AV integration in any commercial or residential environment. And therefore, for the average consumer, although they might love to walk the show floor at CES, walking around ISE would make less sense probably to them. There is only one essentially AV or, if you like, home cinema, if you like, hall. The rest of the halls are dedicated to those commercial environments that I've just mentioned. So everything from piped advertising, massive display boards, that kind of thing, communication systems in hospitals. The show covers all those gamuts and verticals.
So, Jules, you're a regular out there. What is it that you get from the show? What is it that you do when you're out there?
Well, I mean, there are the manufacturers are present there. So speaker manufacturers, projection, all sorts of manufacturers. It's great to see the latest tech that they might be presenting, and to experience those. The other thing is that there's a lot of business done at these places. So even though some of the distributors that I might deal with, some of the manufacturers are just down the road, it's an opportunity to see them all in one place at the same time. So a lot of networking is done as well. So, and after the day's over, there's usually some sort of manufacturer party or distributor's party that you get to. And again, it's opportunity to network with other people in the same place at the same time. So it's incredibly useful for developing those contacts. And yeah, I mean, my wife thinks I'm on Jamboree. I keep telling her I'm working really hard. I believe it's snow is due in the UK sometime soon.
Yeah,
but
tomorrow
here
up here, yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it's like any big trade show. You're going to do a lot of mingling, a lot of talking, a lot of business gets done, Greg. These things are important, and I think I think a point I'm going to make here is that we did have the event, which cancelled a lot of these shows, and we had the lockdowns and everything else, and business kind of crawled along for a few years, and now we're finally getting back to it. And I think I don't know, I can't speak for you, but I think for a lot of people I've spoken to, certainly at CES this year, it's nice to be back. It's nice to be back face to face and actually interacting with people, because we could do it on video calls and all the rest of it, but it's really impersonal, isn't it? It's like you're giving a presentation to somebody. You're not actually standing speaking to somebody.
Yeah, it's great to get back to back to the face-to-face interaction. That's why I go to the ISE show. We have more than 300 individuals now that have had PVA training or PVA certified video professionals. I want to meet with them, want to talk with what their concerns are, and then spread the word of the PVA. I specifically, again, I also went to the ISE show to announce what the PVA is now partnered with Barco Residential, which is a pretty big deal for us. It's the major player in cinema projection, and now PVA is a partner company within the Barco Residential, and we have certified their entire line. We spent we did 1 week in Belgium in November, and we certified, we checked out, verified, and certified their entire line of residential projectors.
Yeah, and it's a different proposition when you're dealing with people face to face, isn't it, Martin? You get more of that. I call it impersonal, because you start talking about things that you wouldn't talk about on a video call, and that's where you then build the relationships with people. That's where you then start doing your business, isn't it?
Totally. And, I don't think there's any substitute for meeting people in person. I mean, I think we, pick up communication signals from each other in a one-on-one personal physical environment that you just can't do over a video, a piped video link. So yes, I think it's invaluable. And actually, the best deals are always done when you're with someone. And yes, you get all that extra chat as well, like you said, and the social bit, which is usually omitted on a Zoom call or other.
Yeah.
Well, we met for the first time as well, Martin, didn't we?
Yes, yes, we did. Yes.
So,
Yeah.
that was a nice surprise. We hadn't planned it.
Correct.
No, it's always good for these things. So it's an important show, but why is it important, Jules, in terms of what we're talking about tonight? What kind of tech are we talking about? What kind of markets are we talking about? Is it just the uber rich, fitting out a super yacht, or is it more focused than that?
Well, probably of more interest to AV Forum's frequenters is the fact that is the single hall that we were mainly in, which is to do with the custom install business. So you have all the major distributors there that service our sector, and also manufacturers too. They're all presenting their products as well. There was a demo that Martin and I both went to, which was for Crick's Trinnov, and they were presenting waveforming, which is pretty disruptive as far as audio is concerned, and it's going to improve people's experiences in their cinemas, in their rooms. So it all trickles down to the end user in the end. It's all about improving that experience, that cinematic experience for every single one of us. So useful, really useful to be there.
Okay, you've got me hooked in now. So explain it a little bit more. What is waveform, and what was it that we're actually demonstrating and showing you?
Well, I mean, Martin probably could explain this better than me, but the problem with small rooms is room modes, and the bass response in particular can be problematic in these rooms. So Greg and I, although we're sitting right next to each other, might be, if we're in a particularly difficult room, we might be having a very different bass experience in our cinema. And waveforming is being innovated by Trinnov to basically to really sort of get to grips with that problem, and to give people an equal experience regardless of their seating position. So it's pretty disruptive as far as that's concerned. The previous methods were packing out your room with all sorts of bass traps and things like that, and this is using very, very clever sort of technology to be able to sort of deal with that. Very impressive technology.
Yeah, and
What
I
did you
think,
think, Martin?
yeah, sorry. Well, I think if I'm right in saying Trinnov is offering this as a firmware update to its processor platform, the altitude processors, and they do a really great illustration actually before they start to demo the audio, where they show how the waves of bass literally move through the room like an ocean wave, which is a good illustration, but it also shows that everybody gets equal coverage at every seat of this very impactful bass. And it does work very well. They show you you get a chance to hear it with waveforming off and then waveforming on. And I don't know if any of you have seen this before, but Trinnov always does a very impressive demo at every show. They have this modular room which they actually build on site. And I think they go in with Barco. I think they had a Barco projector there this year, residential projector, and they were using MadVR video technology as well, video processing technology. So yeah, overall, they always put on a good show, Trinnov.
And they had that frequency sweep, didn't they, Martin, at the very
Yes.
beginning, off and then on, and the difference is quite profound. How smooth it was when the waveforming was switched on. It was very, very impressive.
Yep.
I mean, the old approach always used to be a subwoofer in each corner of your room to level out your bass. But moving into what we're talking about now in terms of what you can do with the electronics and so on, is it something that's going to trickle down? Is this Trinnov only, or is this something that you think the industry is going to get behind quite quickly?
At the moment, Phil, I think it's obviously this is a Trinnov thing, but I think Dirac are trying to do something quite similar.
Yeah.
Maybe approaching it in a different way, but again trying to get to grips with this problem. I was there at Barcelona last year and had a demo off-site again, which was also very, very impressive. So owners of Dirac or Dirac, whichever way you prefer, will be looking forward to getting that in their home cinema.
Well, I had that demo at CES, not this year, but the previous year, because obviously it was Storm Audio only, wasn't it, until about October. So, yeah, that was very, very impressive as well. So interesting to see, Trinnov getting on board with that as well. So what else?
It's worth mentioning, actually, Phil, as well, that, for people who are watching the forum who don't know, but I mean, even at 100 hertz, one wavelength is 10 feet. So you've got one wave covering 10 feet dimension, and that's why bass is so difficult to manage in a small room. In a large room, it's easy. Outdoors, it's even easier. But at home, it's a challenge. Whereas high frequencies are easy to deal with. Cinemas have a challenge with getting high frequencies to travel across a large space.
Yeah. So what else out there that really caught your eye, guys? Jules?
Well, we both, and Martin's already mentioned it, but we both were on the MadVR Envy demo as well. They again have also been pretty disruptive in terms of video processors. They've made a big splash over the last couple of years with their product. It actually began, and it's still available, I think, as a free software download. Build your own HTPC and do it there, but you may be slightly limited in the sort of sources you can use with it. But they've been retailing this sort of pre-configured box, everything maxed out and optimized, and it's been very, very impressive. Some of the things that they are particularly focusing on are something called motion AI. How to build a better mousetrap, effectively, frame interpolation on steroids. Trying to, you know, I know a lot of people might not particularly appreciate, as I do, and I like 24 frame, the feel of 24 frames. And some people might feel they're losing some detail as things you know, pan across a screen. And Motion AI is the intent is to try and recover some of that detail without necessarily adding soap opera effect. So this is just quite a challenge. Most of the people that I spoke to at the the MadVR demo were quite impressed by what they were doing. I don't know what Martin feels, what his experience was like.
Yeah, I was. Well, there are a couple of things I was very impressed with, which is the dynamic tone mapping for people who don't have such a feature in their displays, and that's particularly pertinent to projector owners. Also, the aspect ratio manipulation as well, which you can program, which is very exciting again for people with projectors or TVs as well. Actually, I mean, there are so many things you can do with it. It's fantastic. The non-linear stretch technology, I wasn't so sold on. That's where you can distort the image at the sides to, if for example you've got a 2.35:1 screen or a ultra wide TV monitor, you can have stretch distortion in different parts of the screen to fit that native aspect ratio of your display. That's something I would probably use less, but nevertheless, it's intriguing stuff. And they can also move subtitles partially outside of black bars as well. I've got a Blu-ray player which actually moves the entire subtitle into the image. So again, I wouldn't have much need for that. But the dynamic tone mapping is a great asset, I think, and the aspect ratio management.
Yeah, and color calibration as well with the 3D LUTs as well. That can really make a difference too.
Yeah. So that, we're talking about this technology. Maybe some of the users out there are not familiar with MadVR, not familiar with video processors. So in what way does that become useful for them, Jules? What is it it's actually doing, and what can they, what kind of system can they use it in?
Well, I think primarily owners of home theaters, because this product is not cheap, would appreciate if they've got a projection system in particular. Everything we've been talking about here in terms of aspect ratio handling, for instance, if you have a CinemaScope screen in your cinema, a projection room, you can program the MadVR so that it recognizes your screen boundaries, and it will then automatically fit the content on your scope screen so that you don't lose anything. And there's no physical need to zoom in or zoom out with your lens on your projector. Particularly if you get, for instance, we have multi-aspect ratio movies now, like Top Gun Maverick, which are flipping in the middle of it. Good luck with that if you've got a lens memory system. It's not going to work for you. So something like that handles the aspect ratio. And as we said, the dynamic tone mapping on a projector. Remember, you're trying to get mostly 1,000 nit content on projectors that can barely do 100 nits depending on your screen size again. It's like, again, good luck with that unless you have some sort of dynamic tone mapping going on. So there are real advantages for video processors, of which MadVR is only one. There are other ones out there. But they really do transform projection systems in particular. But adding to that, both of us saw the demo of the tone mapping on a display on a flat panel. I think it was probably a Sony flat panel.
It was.
Sony panel. And the demonstration did show that there were, again, tone mapping benefits even to the flat panel as well. So it's not just exclusively for projectors.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned changing aspect ratios, because that is important now. Because certainly when I had a scope screen and I was using a JVC N5 projector, I would use the automated system, and I would put blanking at top and bottom. So even if it changes aspect ratio, I should still be seeing what the 235 version would be.
Actually,
but there is an issue, because a lot of directors are now actually reframing from the theatrical version for these multi-aspect ratios on Blu-ray. So where in theory, the 235 version that was shown theatrically should be the same as the IMAX version in terms of how it's framed. It just opens up the frames. They're not doing that anymore. Now, a lot of these directors are actually going in and changing it in post for the Blu-ray or 4K Blu-ray release, where they're actually reframing it. So you can't use your projector with your lens memory and just mask top and bottom, because they actually changed the way they frame it, and that's another annoyance
Oh,
for anybody.
I wasn't so aware of that, Phil, but a lot of the digital files, the DCI compliant files that go to the cinemas, if they're not in IMAX type, not going to be shown in IMAX type auditoriums, then it usually was that the director would frame everything within a 2.4 frame so that it could go to all the theaters, all the cinemas.
So the theatrical version is correctly framed, because obviously when they're making this stuff, the monitor's masked so they can check that the framing checks out for 240 as well as the aspect ratio for IMAX. But what this new trend now is that the directors are going in and they're reframing the IMAX shots. So it no longer matches up with the 235 that it should be theatrically. So I think there's a couple where that's been the case, and if you're using a system like that. So it's interesting that MadVR actually offer a way around that potentially. So yeah. Right. Anything else that we need to talk about in terms of what you guys actually saw and what, kind of blew your frock up?
Oh, just one thing, Phil. Steinway and Sons of Steinway Lingdorf fame have produced a soundbar, but it is a passive soundbar.
Okay. How many thousands?
How many thousands of what?
Pounds.
Oh, pounds. I think you can add several zeros to whatever you imagine first.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear a price, nor did I get a chance to hear it, but it's a beautiful looking thing, and it's designed to go under a 75-inch or more TV. And anyway,
if it's Steinway, it will look amazing. It will absolutely. You'll pay for it. You'll pay for it. Gregg, what was your highlights of the show? Because obviously you're there to do a bit of business, but I'm presuming that you had a walk around the show floor and had a look at stuff.
It's bigger and brighter, and that's for everything displays. It's about brightness. It's about the sound cancellation for the bass response. I mean, things are getting better, and I think it's really cool, the evolution that we've gone through I've been doing this 24 years now, going back from CRTs that were 480p. Now we're going into 8K resolution and HDR, and we're talking about 4,000 nits, and it's just like it's really cool. It's a fun field to be in, and it's fun to be with these people that are all having fun in the industry.
Yeah. And like you, a long time being in this game and doing what we're doing, and we were pushing for a long time for a lot of the tech that we now take for granted. The calibration standards. I've given presentations to manufacturers. You've done the same when in the THX days and that kind of thing, to get people on board and give us this and give us that, and why don't we do this? And then you reach this point now where it's like, right, what do we do now? We've kind of achieved everything we wanted to achieve. So, and I got to that point and I thought, well, what are we going to do now? And then it's like, well, actually, why don't we just enjoy it? Enjoy the technology and tell people how to enjoy the technology and show them what they can be doing with their displays and their equipment and so on. And like you say, where we are now to where we are when Navy Forums first started in 2000, it's light years, ahead of where we were back then. So it's exciting tech. I've never been ISE. I would like to go at some point and just experience it. It's a different type of show. In terms of ISE and CEDIA, CEDIA Expo, are they similar, Gregg, in terms of what you're getting from them?
Yes and no. Like ISE has a CEDIA component. CEDIA is a partner within the ISE show. They're not the full show. When you go to the CEDIA show in the United States, it's all home theater, home automation, home AV. And this show is much more commercial in nature.
Yeah.
With the home theater component.
Yeah. So as we wrap up on ISE, anything else that you guys saw out there, or anything else that you think, oh, this could be a trend this year, this could be a bit of a game changer?
Well, I think some of the impressive tech that you saw at CES was also present at ISE, Phil, like transparent OLED signage and that kind of stuff. It's it's pretty cool stuff. Hard to think of any sort of application in the home, in people's cinemas, but but it's very impressive. It just shows you what can be achieved, and you know, maybe holographic content is not too far.
But and, you know, a lot of people say, well, what's the point? You know, how can I use that? But if companies are not innovating, if they're not trying new things, if they're not coming up with these displays, I mean, digital signage, that's perfect. You know, transparent OLED is perfect for that kind of thing. Hotels, you know, receptions, all that kind of thing. I can think of lots of uses for tech like that in a commercial environment. In the home, yeah, maybe not, but who knows? They might stumble upon something while they're putting, you know, transparent OLEDs together and think, well, actually, that might be more applicable to the consumer. And if companies are not pushing things and not developing, then we're kind of standing still and not progressing. So yeah,
Yeah.
one day I'm gonna go.
And of course, you know, there were the large TVs that you saw at CES as well, the TCL Z 115-inch mini LED display. So it was good to be able to see that after you'd seen it at CES and we'd spoken about it, you know, a few weeks back. So that was a good experience.
Yeah, excellent. So it looks like it's going to be an exciting year ahead. So let's make some predictions of what we think the big trends are going to be for the year ahead. What is it that us as enthusiasts are going to get enthusiastic about, and what potentially could we end up finding in our homes? So, you know, it's no surprise that the large screen TVs are going to dominate this year. We've seen that trend starting already. Where does it end, Greg?
Well, I'll make it 2 5-year predictions.
Okay.
One of them is we're going to revisit 3D at some point. As we get more light output,
No.
their manufacturers are going to try to sell it to us again.
I don't think you're too far away there, because there's always a 3D aspect on the stands wherever you go to these trade shows. So far it hasn't been moving video; it's just been concept stuff. But there might be something in that one. Maybe something in it. Jules?
Well, for this next year, what we spoke about already in terms of the audio side of things, we're going to see waveforming and with the Dirac active room treatment as well, trying to improve your audio experience in your room. And again, as you said, the large TVs, you know, and to that point, and no, I don't think projectors are dead at all. I just think that maybe UST projectors might suffer from this. As the panels get you know, larger and more impressive.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's important to point out why USTs in particular, because that technology relies on you still having a screen. You know, you can put it on your wall, but you're not going to get the best out of it. You still have to have an ALR screen. So you still have to have the screen on the wall, or you can have something that comes out of something that has to sit on the floor. You know, if you've got a power up screen or whatever, it's quite cumbersome. And then when you think about, well, I could just have a TV. Yeah, it's going to be a big TV and it's going to be heavy, but you know, it doesn't have to come up out of the floor, and it's still a screen on a wall. So
those USTs, you know, whenever I've seen and calibrated them, they're usually in around, you know, the screen's about 100 inches, something like that. It's not as big as some of the projection screens that I might calibrate, come across in more dedicated rooms. And the client usually thinks of it as yeah, it's more preferable to having a long throw situation. They can't manage a long through probably because of the room dimensions. So it gives them a big screen. But there are compromises to be made. You know, the black levels aren't so good. There are you know, so I think that a TV going up to 98 inches, something like that, will probably, as the prices come down too, will probably really impact on that sector.
Yeah. Martin, what do you think the trend's going to be this year?
Actually, just going back to Gregg's point about 3D, I remember Johan Allen from Dolby said to me once, 3D keeps coming back like athlete's foot. So anyway, it will come back. But I think there's going to be more of a trend for wireless and very home-friendly soundbar systems with surround. I think Sony, in some ways, with their HTA9 system, were kind of ahead of the curve there with their Dolby Atmos spatial audio system. Very nice home-friendly designs and very fine performing as well. Although that was quite an expensive system. But I don't know if you saw this, Phil, at CES, but I think Sharp created a bit of a stir with their new wireless soundbar / surround system 7.1 or whatever, and is predicted to be very budget friendly as well and very fine performing. I think that system is only designed to go with their own branded displays, but I think that's going to be the direction of travel: home-friendly wireless surround systems, moving a bit away from the soundbar model and branching out a little from that, or evolving from that.
Yeah, I think there's a few trends that we're starting to see as people spend more time in their homes and so on. I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast now, but I definitely think that people are thinking about their living space a lot more. There
And
is a
also,
trend.
sorry, the performance is getting really good from these small
Yeah,
enclosures
yeah,
as well. I
and
mean, last year I reviewed the Amazon Echo Studio, which is a self-contained unit, which you can pair up and have two either side of a TV, and really sounded very impressive.
yeah, and of course we got FlexConnect from Dolby Atmos. So this is really interesting tech. I didn't get a chance to see it at CES. It was closed door demos, and I didn't have an opportunity to get in and have a look at it. But basically, you can have a couple of speakers anywhere in your room, and the TV on a completely opposite wall, and so on. And it uses processing in the room and so on to try and create an immersive experience with just a couple of speakers that are not necessarily positioned where they should be positioned, because what they're trying to take into account is how people use their living rooms. And when you see how do I set up my home cinema, and it's always a rectangular room with a screen exactly where it should be, the chair exactly where it should be, each speaker exactly. Nobody lives like that. Unless you've got the luxury of having a dedicated room. Nobody lives like that. So this is where I think some people have been getting frustrated with it. Some people have been looking at, why have I got a room that's got 7.4.4 speakers in it, and so on, and they're looking at the living space and the downsizing. I think it's a big trend. I think it's still continuing, and I think this is where we start to see things like FlexConnect from Dolby and a few other techs coming along, where they're taking that into account, that not everybody, like we said in the display podcast last week, not everybody lives in a grading suite, everybody lives in a theatre or in a room that's conducive to having that kind of setup. So it's interesting to see where companies are thinking out the box, literally thinking out the box in terms of where we place our equipment, how we get the best out of it in non-ideal situations, and so on. Even things that impress me, like the Canvas hi-fi thing, it's a lot of money. It's not going to suit everybody, but again, it's another company thinking out the box, and it's not one of these sound bars, but at the same time, it's not a full-on hi-fi system, but it's the best of both, and using processing technology to help with that. So I think my trend for the year is that everything's not going to stay the same. I think people are now looking at home cinema, media rooms, living rooms in a different way, not the traditional way. And the traditional way will always stay. I'm not saying that's dead and people are suddenly going to get rid of the JVC projectors and the CinemaScope screens and all the rest of it. But I think amongst larger sector of consumers, when it comes to home cinema and so on, I think we're going to see some changes. I think we're going to see more in terms of streaming services and that kind of thing coming online, and how people use their audio systems, how people use their TVs with their audio systems. I think we're going to see a few changes there. That's my prediction anyway. So
we're seeing more of the quote unquote the media room nowadays.
Yes.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you'd have a smaller television when TV sizes were much smaller than they are now, or you have a projection system, and now you can have a very large. Well, you can have a UST projector, but you can have a much larger television. And of course, that then creates a different environment. You can put that in your lounge. You're not going to have a blacked out room necessarily, so you're going to have ambient light in there, and so the experience is consumed in a different way than you do traditionally. So
and going back to what you had demoed at ISE, so this waveforming technology, who's to say that in 5 years' time that technology is not in these small speakers or in a TV and doing exactly the same thing and using processing to make a room that's not ideal a bit more practical and a bit more usable, where you can get more of an experience out of the kit.
I think even from last year, Phil, there's been developments in waveforming. I think they're now saying that it can be achieved with 4 subwoofers. you're still better off with a few more. But I think last year there was some like 16 subwoofers in the room. I can't remember whether that's front and back or just what, but it's being scaled down as we speak. So yes, it is coming into smaller situations.
Phil,
So-
the other thing is, you said you know, that you got to the point where you thought we've kind of topped out. We've got everything we could possibly want. But you know, we used to think that 25 years ago, when I worked at Lucasfilm, we thought that we'd reached the ceiling. We'd kind of got as technology had got as good as it was ever going to get. In another 20 years, we'll be having the same conversations. And
Yeah, exactly,
yeah.
exactly. But I think maybe it's just reading online nowadays. Maybe it's just the tone of the internet nowadays, where actually, guys, just think about where we are and what we're talking about. You're talking about minute differences between a couple of products, and you're getting in a bun fight about it. It's like, look at what you've got. Look at what you got at home.
Yeah.
Be happy with what you have, and and hopefully this is where we become useful, and more useful, and pointing people in the right direction in terms of technology, in terms of how to get the best out of their home cinema systems. If you're downsizing, what should you be looking at? What things should you consider? If you're building a media room or a living room or a home cinema, where do you place the speakers? What should you be thinking about in terms of viewing distances and furnishing and all that kind of thing? Because that's another big growth area. I forgot to say in my trends. Interior design is becoming more and more relevant to people. It wasn't 10 years ago. Over the last 10 years, it's become more prevalent. And I think it's things now where, especially when you look at the market in general and a lot wider, you see how people are furnishing their spaces, their living spaces, and so on. There's more thought going into that in terms of not minimalist, but making it more cozy and using technology to help with that. And again, I think there's going to be a crossover there with home cinema and audio and visual technology. I think it's exciting. We maybe reached, like you say, Martin, you think, oh, well, where can we go for here? Well, actually, there's loads of places we can go, and there's lots of things that we can still be doing. And things are just going to get better. But that's enough for this week. That's our predictions. Come back and check and see how wrong we were. By the time we get to the end of the year, these podcasts are around forever. So, egg on the face. We're happy to take it. That's our suggestions for this year. If you've got your thoughts, or you think where things are going to be in 12 months' time, or what you're excited about, what are your plans? Are you changing your room? Are you looking to do things? I know Martin's he's been looking at changing his room, and Martin lives in a rented accommodation. So maybe Martin can give us some tips in the months ahead as to how he solved some of the potential issues he's had in terms of setting up his AV system, and how to get the best out of it there. We'll be doing some other bits and pieces here in terms of rooms and setting rooms up for different aspects and that kind of thing. So any questions on that, then get them in podcast@avforums.com on the email. You can search out this podcast at AV Forums, bottom of the forum list, podcast forum, find this podcast and put your questions in there. And of course, the description box down here if you're watching on YouTube. And of course, remember to subscribe to the AV Forums Podcasts YouTube channel, not the main channel, AV Forums Podcast. Just go subscribe there. You'll never miss any of our podcasts. And of course, they're going to turn up every Monday. And the next episode is the movies. So you get 2 for 1 with movies. So you can join the guys on the 26th of February from 7 p.m. On our YouTube channel. And of course, you can also get that audio only through your podcast provider. And then the Hi-Fi edition returns on the 4th of March. So Monday, the 4th of March, for myself and Ed and a couple of guests for the Hi-Fi edition. Those are available, like I say, from 7 p.m. So go and check them out every Monday through the year. If you've enjoyed this podcast, then of course, subscribe, do all the cliched social media stuff. And of course, if you want to buy us a coffee, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/AV Forums. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for watching. Thanks to the guys tonight, and we'll see you again very soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.